Let's take you live to the Black Business Council Summit, where the Minister of Industry and Competition is speaking, Ebrahim Patel.
Under this theme, recognizes that transformation requires shifts. Shifts in who has access to economic opportunities. It also recognizes that a key part of transformation is to subvert the colonial legacy of our economy through structural changes which include, in terms of our structure, being an exporter of primary commodities in mining and agriculture, and being an importer of final value-added goods. These transformations, demographically and in the structural features of our economy, are complementary and mutually reinforcing. Given the attack on transformation from a grouping of NGOs and others representing the old order, it is worth recalling our fundamental rationale with transformation. What is it? The goal of public policy is to build economic inclusion through transformation programs in three broad areas. First, strengthening inclusivity and transformation in the quality of growth, including broadening ownership and more inclusive corporate governance models. In ownership transformation, we're talking about a greater spread of ownership in the economy to black industrialists, to women, to youth. And we talk about worker empowerment. Second, because transformation is not only about ownership, it's about addressing the structural challenges to growth through active competition policies, particularly where concentration levels in the market limits new entrants and small and medium businesses. And third is policies that promote spatial transformation, enabling more balanced growth between rural and urban areas and between provinces. We have seen tangible progress on transformation in a number of areas. We mustn't buy into the narrative that the best way to promote transformation is to say there's no transformation. But at the same time, the journey is far from complete. And indeed, there are still significant areas where the level of transformation is weak and where economic inclusion needs to be increased. Truth is, economic opportunity in still too many cases correlate with race, and the demographics of South Africa is not adequately reflected in patterns of economic participation, ownership and control. Look around us and we see. That is why we still focus on transformation and why it continues to be a policy of government. Let me start with a fundamental matter, namely the structure of the economy. The South African market is characterized by significant concentration in key product and service sectors and an excessive reliance on exporting primary commodities and sizable consumer-facing import requirements. In 2017, I met with the Competition Commission to receive a report on a very interesting piece of research that they had done on a few sectors of the economy, trying to track from their own market surveys and work what the levels of economic concentration was. And I said to them, why don't you broaden that work and try to cover the whole economy and pull in other data sources so that we have a rich template that shows what is happening in the economy more generally. The Commission subsequently conducted a study of 178 economic subsectors that quantified current high levels of concentration, and it released its results, I guess about 5 months ago. And I have seen Deputy Commissioner Hardin Rachisudu here earlier, and he and the team in the Commission did really an excellent piece of work. The study, which is the most comprehensive that has been published in South Africa, found that of the 144 subsectors of the economy with sufficient data, about 70% were found to be highly concentrated, 21% were moderately concentrated, and less than 10% had unconcentrated markets. It found that such levels have persisted, with already highly concentrated sectors experiencing increasing concentration in a number of cases. So where you had concentration, it had the effect of keeping out new entrants, leading to increasing concentration. It found that in some instances, merger activity in government licensed industries had consolidated ownership. So government would issue licenses to a number of players. Some of those players would then sell their businesses to dominant firms and to other firms, meaning that what we are attempting to do to spread ownership then get cashed in, and the result is increasing concentration. It found that the number of small and medium enterprises is growing, but they have a low share of value addition in the economy, and they face high exit rates. So yes, if you count numbers, they're big. But if you count share, they're not. And if you count longevity, can they stay in the market, then there are enormous pressures on them, and many of them exit. And it found that there's a far higher degree of inequality in the distribution of firm income at a firm level, than household income. Now, let me underline that. South Africa is seen through the Gini coefficient to be one of the most unequal societies. And that's measured at the level of the individual. What the Commission did was they applied those methodologies to firm level, and they found sharp inequalities there. In particular, the agricultural value chain stands out as having large declines in participation at the farm level, with growing concentration for inputs and processing. The study also looked at the international experience. It said, okay, what's happening here, but also let's see what's happening elsewhere in the world in other economies. And the report, and I want to encourage you to read that report. It's a thick report. It's almost like the old phone books. For younger people in the audience, there was a time when we had people's numbers printed in a book, and you could use that book as a door stopper. If your door couldn't close, it was thick. But there is the good news. The good news is the Commission has done a short version in 68 pages. And Tommy Oliphant is shaking his head in agreement. He's going to read that 68 pages. What that report provides information on is who owns the firms, who in turn produce what you eat, what you read, what you drink or smoke, or where you gamble, what you drive or who you fly with. It identifies the firms where you shop, where you go for your medicine, your blood tests, your x-rays, who makes the pipes for the water we use, who produce the renewable energy, but also the coal, your insurance, your retirement fund, your medical aid, and who you bank with. I'm sure many of you would want to read it. Maybe the BBC can put it on its website. And it shows that a small number of firms dominate key sectors of the economy. The challenge of economic concentration, of course, is not limited to South Africa and is indeed global, but it's particularly severe in South Africa. Now, let me be clear. The findings of the report is not an argument against large companies, because South Africa needs large local firms that can be our champions in global markets and who can provide us with the economies of scale and base for technological innovation to drive our growth and our development. But the report points, however, to how the structure of a concentrated market can act to keep small and medium players out of that market, and black industrialists who are new entrants. And that in turn impacts on inequality, a narrow base of entrepreneurship, and weak economic performance. South Africa pays a heavy price when the base of the economy rests on a narrow demographic. The Commission's report can therefore assist in the development or implementation of public policies to ensure access and opportunities to participate. Global economic participation brings significant benefits to many societies. Access to goods and services, lower prices, access to innovation. But it comes with challenges for economic inclusion. And for this reason, the issue of economic inequality has become a more pressing policy concern in many different parts of the world. A major set of discussions is about what can government do. And so South Africa has taken the lead in changes to our competition policy, which has more recently been introduced, where we've really made groundbreaking changes that allows the competition authorities unusually to look not only at firm conduct, what the company is doing in the market, but also structure. How does the structure of a market keep new players and new entrants out? Now, that's not done in competition policy globally. What competition policy does is it looks at your conduct. What are you doing with your pricing, with your behavior, and so on? And so when we put this on the table, we were told by many established competition practitioners that we're breaking the rules of competition policy. But we said after so many years of freedom and after the Competition Act had been in place for so many years, if we don't see tangible and clear evidence of more opportunity, then we do need, if needs be, to break fresh ground. So it raises the broader question, what is it that government can do to respond to both the global and the domestic context and its implication for the project of transformation? Now, government is much wider than my mandate. So I want to focus not on the broader issues that all of government can do, but a couple of areas, 9 areas, where the DTIC has had a responsibility, a role, or some degree of influence. The first is on industrial funding to support the emergence of black and women industrialists. The second is competition provisions to support supplier development aimed at bringing more SMMEs and supply chains of larger companies. So it's to bring more SMMEs into the supply chains of larger companies. The third is competition measures on market access, including dealing with the behavior of large dominant firms where their behavior excludes new players. The fourth one is on BBBEE codes and charters that set targets on ownership, sourcing, and management. The fifth is the equity equivalent program that gives global companies that don't normally have equity in them, they don't have local shareholding, that gives them a responsibility and an opportunity to contribute to broad-based black economic empowerment. The sixth one is master plans in different industries that harness the power of partnerships. The seventh one is special economic zones and industrial parks. The eighth one is the promotion of small and medium enterprises, townships and rural economy firms. And finally, state preferential procurement measures, which will be and continue to be a critical element of the measures used by organs of state to promote and drive transformation. The BEE Act recognizes that the authority vested in government is to establish a national policy on broad-based black economic empowerment that promotes the economic unity of the nation, protects our market, and promotes equal opportunity and equal access to government services. Our national policy grants us many tools and instruments to give effect to this authority. A key part of our approach has been to strengthen compliance. Passing the law, issuing the regulation is often the easiest part. It's getting that compliance because once you've made the rules, There are hundreds of, if not thousands of decisions made by tens of thousands of public officials in many different places. And it's watching that and aligning that each time to the policy that is the key to success. It's about harmonizing regulation, meaning that what we do in one area of our work shouldn't clash with what we're doing in another area of our work. And it's about undertaking enforcement where necessary. Where if you have a rule, rules will be broken. When rules are broken, there has to be consequences. We've also sought to expand participation by black and women industrialists and broadening the base of ownership to include the workers as co-creators of wealth. So for us, BEE, broad-based BEE, has many different constituencies. And the BBC has an opportunity to work closely in alliance with all of these different constituencies. Your black professionals. I see Kashif here today representing black professionals. There are the small businesses. There are the black industrialists that are beginning to have medium-sized and even larger firms. There are workers themselves. So getting all of those constituencies to recognize the value of what we need to do and what we're doing, and getting all of them to represent a public narrative that challenges this counter-narrative against transformation, that challenges the idea that all transformation is only about politically connected people or corruption, or indeed that BEE is only about redistribution, that it doesn't have a growth element in it. We recently concluded an economic reconstruction and recovery program aimed at using trade, industrial financing, competition, and other tools to have more products produced in South Africa. And helping in that way as we bring more black industrialists into market to give them access to markets. And so I would be looking really to the work that the BBC and the firms represented here can do to help us drive that industrialization effort. By industrialization, we mean two things. We mean, number one, clawing back parts of the domestic market that we've lost to imports, so that South African-made goods are available. And it's not just an act of patriotism, it makes economic sense. In 2019, which is the last year before COVID, we were importing 1.3 trillion rands worth of goods. Take oil out of the equation. That still leaves you with 1.1 trillion rand. That's an opportunity, a massive market that we need to move into. And the other part of industrialization is to move into export markets. And a very significant export market is available on the rest of the African continent, because our continent has the same feature as South Africa. It exports raw materials, it imports finished goods. I don't tire of sharing this statistic. Africa has 17% of the world's population, 17. Africa accounts for 3% of global GDP, 1% of global steel production, less than 1% of global auto production. And so if we want to change the storyline for our continent, we've got to get those metrics sorted. And that means a much more directed, disciplined program of building African businesses and industrial capability. And it can't be done through administrative fiat by government. It means building competitive, dynamic firms. Let me give a few highlights of some of the work we've done. In 2020, we did the last major review of what we've done since the launch of the Black Industrialist Program. And I presented the reports in Parliament. And at the time, it shows that over the 5-year period, 32 billion rand in funding had been approved to more than 900 black industrialists and black-owned businesses by the DTIC, the IDC, and the NEF. That black industrialists and black-owned businesses funding by the DTIC and its agencies had a broad impact. That more than 900 businesses have been supported, more than 50,000 jobs created or sustained, that these businesses had an annual turnover of more than 75 billion rand per annum, and that they attracted significant counterparty investment of a further 30 billion. And what it points to, sitting under the numbers, you don't need to remember the numbers, but the point to make is when we support a successful black business, it adds to the GDP and to the pool of employment in the country. And as black South Africans, we're not telling that story well. We're not telling the story to our own people, to communities, to workers and others, that when we drive a transformation agenda, we're also driving an agenda of growth. And these things that I've said to you are complemented by other policies that we've done. For example, competition supplier development funds that in 2020 had already committed more than 4.5 billion rand with over 500 black farming businesses supported. Where we sit with companies when they do a major deal, we're busy now with a major deal that will be announced fairly soon, as soon as the Competition Tribunal hears it, where there's also a big supplier development component aimed at black farmers, black industrialists, black suppliers. We've got competition procurement initiatives. For example, more than 900 million rand had been committed by Massmart to more than 20 black-owned suppliers. So it's not just that they're going to buy, but they also made money available to help build those businesses. There are worker empowerment schemes, which I'm going to come back to, equity equivalent programs, I'll come back to that, master plans and so on. So let me just focus. I'm not going to cover on everything because having a look at the time, I recognize I'm going to have to focus a bit. I'm going to cover just a couple of areas over the last 12 months. First area is industrial support. The DTIC, IDC and NEF, by the way, the IDC has not received capital injection from government since 1994. In fact, probably since the 1960s. It has to use its own balance sheet to grow its source of investable funds and then take that source of funds and deploy it for development purposes. But the DTIC, IDC and NEF has unlocked over 2.5 billion rand in new support to about 180 black industrialists. And over the next 3 years, we've asked them to look at setting aside in their planning, and in each of these entities have to table a plan in Parliament that covers the next 3 years, and it's part of the budget program. And the support for black industrialists over the next 3 years, the NEF and IDC and DTIC have committed to more than 12 billion rand. They will then unlock a further 10 billion rand from counterparty investment, bringing 21.6, call it 22 billion rand in support for black industrialists. If I make the category wider, and we look at broader categories of transformation, women, youth, and broader black-owned businesses, not just black industrialists, then the total committed funds over the next 3 years begins to reach over 20 billion rand. And that will then unlock a further, call it another 20 billion rand. Now, I raise that because that's a pool of funds that the IDC, NEF, and DTIC is publicly accountable for. We have to publish reports saying how that money has been used, whether that money, in some cases they're grants, what have they had as the long-term effect of building a sustainable business? In other cases, they're loans. Has that loans been repaid? But more importantly, what businesses were sustained with it? How many new jobs have been created? Which new areas of the economy are black South Africans able to enter and expand? So that's the one area that we've done over the last 12 months and our planning that we've put into the budget. Even when the DTIC budget got cut, we indicated that transformation is such an important area of our work that we've got to scrape around and make sure that there is resources for this key area of our work, because transformation is not separate to the other work of the DTIC. If we achieve some of our goals here, it also helps us to achieve goals around growth, jobs, exports, and so on. Which brings me to exports as my second area. In this past year, we've put a lot of effort into the African Continental Free Trade Area. I would actually welcome an opportunity where the BBC brings together a wide range of black businesses that can be briefed in detail on the AFC FTA. That's the name. We've given it a very clumsy name. The president sometimes mispronounces it, but it's the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that AFC FTA is really the potentially biggest source of new growth for the South African economy in the next 10 to 15 years. It creates for the first time a market of scale that we are a critical part of. 54 countries have signed the agreement, just over 40 have ratified it through their parliaments or other legal processes. And the idea is that we will begin to trade, and will be, in most cases, a 10-year period where tariffs come down every year between African countries till they eventually get to zero. And a number of black industrialists are already taking part in exports, and I named some of them in Parliament. So what we've done now is, a week ago, we launched a black exporters network. We brought 50 black-owned businesses together, and we launched this. They are in sectors like food, engineering products, auto components, beauty products, and other sectors of the economy. And they're now partnering with government to see how do we open up markets. When the president goes to Ghana, what kind of products do businesses make in South Africa, including black industrialists, that we now need to see how do we work with Ghana, that instead of them importing from Asia or Europe, they import from South Africa. How do we do that when we go on our exhibitions, where there's a big expo? There was the Dubai Expo recently, where we can showcase successes of black-owned businesses. The third area I want to do is, I've spoken a lot about black industrialists, but our work is not only confined to black industrialists. It also, we support efforts where businesses that may be outside of the traditional productive sectors of the economy tries to ensure a greater spread of ownership. Just this week, we received a message, and I think there may have been a public announcement, that Global Credit Rating Limited, which is one of these rating companies that has just been taken over by Moody's, that they've now entered into an agreement where 20% of the shareholding in Global Credit Rating will be held by African Women Chartered Accountants Investment Holdings. That was facilitated by the DTIC in that discussion. And it's one of a number of such examples. They don't make the headlines in the newspaper. They're a small announcement, sometimes in a SENS announcement that just passes by from the JSE. Sometimes they're just an announcement that the media, that the company puts out on their website. But there are many such examples. And the BBC could helpfully monitor that and showcase it. The next one is on investment promotion. President Ramaphosa gave us a tough mandate 4 years ago. He said, called us in, said, I want to make an announcement on a new investment target for the country. And at the time, and he said, at the time, I want to make it a target of $100 billion. And on the exchange rate then, that came to 1.2 trillion rand. And we were quite worried whether we can achieve it, because there were many challenges, energy challenges, there were all the difficulties in the economy and so on. But we took on that challenge, and each year at the investment conferences, companies come forward and they make pledges. Many of those pledges get translated into tangible things. For example, if you go now and you get your vaccine for COVID, and it's a J&J vaccine, the announcement by the company that does the manufacturing of it was done at the 2018 investment conference. If you go out and, depending on your taste, you go and buy a new Mercedes-Benz C-Class, that C-Class, that new model, which is only made in 3 countries in the world. It's made in Buffalo City in South Africa, it's made in Bremen in Germany, and it's made in Beijing in China. That car, the investment underpinning it, was made at the investment conference. You don't like the Mercedes-Benz, you want something a bit, let's say, more affordable, so you go and buy a Toyota Corolla Cross. Well, it's a hybrid vehicle, so it's got an electric motor and internal combustion engine. That announcement was made at an investment conference. You think, well, you know, you don't like either of those two. They're both sedans. You like a bakkie. You want to put your farming products on the bakkie. You can buy the new Isuzu D-Max. That announcement was made at the investment conference. But this year, we focus on giving space to black industrialists to make announcements. And to those who were present, there may have been some of the members of the audience, you would have remembered how great a feeling it was each time a company comes up and the announcer can say, this is a black industrialist in this sector or in that sector. Showing that black South Africans are contributing to the stock of investment in the country. And at this last conference, some 37 billion rand was announced by black industrialists. Next, I want to go to worker ownership. In the last 12 months, we've worked with a number of companies to see how we can get workers to get more shares in their own companies. And we reached agreements with Shoprite, with Burger King, and with Imperial Logistics. Each of these were in a competition process. And if you add the workers that qualify for the equity from these 3 companies, it's about 100,000 additional workers who are now shareholders in the firms that they work for in 1 year. And that is a massive increase in broad-based empowerment. For those of our critics who say BEE or broad-based BEE is only for a select few, they have to explain 100,000 workers having equity in their firms. And for example, in the Imperial one, you've got normal, let's call it traditional BEE, and you've got the worker component. If you add up the number of workers who are now owners in their own companies, it amounts to about just over 400,000 workers. And we want this number to grow so that we promote both black industrialists where energetic South Africans bring their passion, their know-how to build businesses, and we bring broadening of that base to workers, to women. The next area I want to deal with is KZN relief. When the unrest took place in KZN last year, one of the significant blows was to black businesses. It was often businesses in townships that were destroyed, burnt. And I went around there. I met, for example, a husband and wife team that had built an engineering business. And the CEO came with me. Everything destroyed. So what did the DTIC and its agencies did was, over a very short period of time, we've approved applications of support for about 3 billion rand. And these are being rolled out now, covering a very large number of firms, more than 2,000 firms that are being supported. Many of them are small businesses. They're small sugar farmers, they're factories, they're shops, they're even funeral parlors, they're even ice cream vendors. The last area I want to deal with is equity equivalent. And that is the work we've done to build the capacity of multinational corporations to grow transformation. And we did an agreement with JP Morgan last year, which commits them to using and unlocking 384 million rand in funding 500 early stage businesses and creating 1,000 jobs over 8 years. And it's one of a number of examples. I'm going to skip because of time, talking about the master plans, what we've done on sugar, 200 million rand a year to small scale sugar farmers, the funding through the Automotive Industry Transformation Fund that supports 6 black-owned companies now in less than a year of the fund, the Poultry Master Plan, where black growers now will contribute to 2 million additional birds a year. And I want to conclude with some challenges that we face. The first challenge is this tendency of legal challenges mounted against the legislative, regulatory and policy instruments developed since the start of the democracy aimed at transforming the economy. It's a dangerous strategy and it will fail. Weak transformation outcomes will make distributional contests more fractious within workplaces and at society level and will undermine the social stability on which successful democracies rest. And so for these and many other reasons, we need to have the BBC, black-owned firms, black industrialists standing up and showing society the benefits that transformation brings. Because very much the public narrative is one only of costs and problems. And yes, there are costs. And yes, there are problems. And yes, sometimes corrupt individuals use the mask of BEE. But there are also many, many, many successful examples. There are many instances where black South Africans are building their own economy. And those stories need to be told. And part of what we need to do is what the President has challenged us, President Ramaphosa has challenged us to build a social compact. And the question is, how can we use that to build broad-based transformation? There are more things that we need to do on the Competition Act. We're only now rolling out these new provisions of the Act. For the first time, a market inquiry is being held under the new provisions. We're recognizing that money is not always the only gap, that there are issues, other challenges that black businesses face, technical partnerships, support networks, business coaching, and so on. And we're now working with companies to address this. And then there's the coordination challenge within government to work in a common way. In conclusion, our task in pursuit of building a capable developmental and responsive state must include to strengthen the ownership, management, control, enterprise and supplier development elements of our BEE framework, while ensuring it complements our pursuit to industrialize and structurally transform our economy. The job isn't done. More needs to be done. A lot of successes have been achieved. Celebrate those successes. Focus our effort and your effort on achieving a lot more. Because to get to the point where we begin to see an economy that draws in the full talent pool of all South Africans, when we reach that point, we can say we've moved beyond transformation. We haven't got there yet. Thank you very much.